Today I'm bringing you a build I call the Unraveling Storm. This is a Strand Titan build using the Aspect Flechette Storm. That is a slide melee that lets you jump up into the air and shoot Unraveling blasts at your enemies, and it hits pretty hard. Each one of these does about 91% of the damage of an ignition, and you can spam these pretty often thanks to our exotic, which is Wishful Ignorance. This will give you more melee energy every time the Aspect Banner of War pulses, which can be up to every 1 second. And on top of that, it's going to boost the damage pretty considerably as you do consecutive hits with it. On top of that, we're going to add in some Bolt Discharge from the weapon perk Rolling Storm on a Psychopomp area denial grenade launcher. And then we'll also be taking Horde Shuttle and the artifacts so we get some threadlings as we shoot those Unraveled enemies. On top of that, we have the Strand Kit, which gives us Woven Mail and Severing and grenade regen and just a lot of other great stuff. This will not probably compare quite as well to the Bolt Charge Barricade build that's around, but it is a lot of fun and very versatile, and it gives you good team support because it gives those allies healing from Banner of War and melee damage boost. See here, we've rolled through this Legend campaign mission pretty easily. We're unraveling everything, Bolt Charge, Lightning Charges going off left and right, and we still have a really great super to fall back on in Blade Fury that is pretty versatile. Not the best for boss damage, but still solid. If that sounds good to you, let's get into it. I'm Engineer. So, for a overview of the build, our goal is to unravel and sever everything while keeping a constant stream of Bolt Charge going. Generally, this is mostly used for ad clear and some light boss encounters. I haven't tried it in a raid boss encounter. It might actually scale pretty well thanks to Wishful Ignorance. I'll put that on my list. I'm still farming Vaulted Glass each week with my clan, so maybe I'll try it out there on Atheon and see what happens. Content level, I've tested this up to 15 power levels under. I think you could probably go further with this. It might fly in some GMs if there's a Strand Surge because it's doing a lot of Strand damage, but I haven't had a chance to test it yet. Now for the pros, it gives a lot of healing from Banner of War and some good damage boost. It does really good team support because it gives your allies that healing as well, and it also gives them that melee damage boost, which is great. It has really good AoE damage and also really good single target damage because it kind of scales based on how many hits you land. Now on the con side, you only have the roaming super, so that's going to fall off a little bit for some boss encounters. You do lose some melee regen when you play solo because the melee regen scales based on how many allies are near you, and the damage resistance just isn't consistent. You don't have a great source of Woven Mail outside of Threat of Hoarding, which only lasts for about 5 seconds, so that Woven Mail won't have really great uptime unless your teammates are just printing out orbs for you. Now, let's talk about the exotic. The exotic is Wishful Ignorance. This was launched with the final shape, so you need to own the final shape, and you can only get it from Rahul's Novel Decryption. So you're going to need to reset his reputation 1 time per episode or season, and then you go to his last tab and get it for an exotic engram and an exotic cipher. This exotic does a few things. So it gives Frenzy Blade 1 extra melee ability charge, so that's 4 melee ability charges. And then as you score hits with either Frenzy Blade or Flechette Storm, you build up stacks of Wish Dragon's talents, and you can get up to 3 of those stacks, but you only get 1 stack per ability usage, so that's important to note. Those stacks will boost the damage. Now we're focused on Flechette Storm, so I'll boost it by 10%, 25%, and 50% increased damage. And then lastly, the Banner of War pulses will give you 5% Frenzy Blade melee energy per ally within 10 meters. So, and you also count as one of those allies, so you get 5% if you're by yourself. In a team of 3, you'll get 15% up to every 1 second, and then in a raid team, you get 30% melee energy every second, which is crazy. Now, this is specific Frenzied Blade melee energy, so it is not affected by flat gain factors at all, so that's really great. Let's talk about Flechette Storm because it's really the cornerstone of this build. So what you do is you do a slide and you activate your melee, and that will use half a melee charge to jump up into the air, and then you will fire off the blast. And it is 4 unraveling projectiles, and each deals 171 damage. So that total damage on 1 Flechette Storm blast is 684 damage. Now for reference, an ignition is 750 damage. So just keep that in mind. Now, because the jump uses half of an ability charge, and then each of the Flechette Storms uses half, if you have 1 charge, you can shoot off 1 Flechette Storm. If you have 2 charges, you can shoot off 3. 3 charges, you can shoot off 5. And if you have the full 4 charges, you can shoot off 7 in a row without stopping, which is crazy. Now, each one you fire off will boost the damage. You will get maximum damage after 3 blasts, so you need 2 charges to get to that, but everything after that will get that full 50% damage boost. And for reference, you can see the damage breakdown here and a comparison to ignition. So at 0 stacks, you're at 91% of ignition, At 1 stack, you're doing just as much damage as an ignition with each blast. 2 stacks, you're doing 114%, and at 3 stacks, 137% of an ignition. And you can really spam these. In general, for ad clear, you want to use maybe 1 to 3 Flechette Storms. These are going to kill most enemies. They're pretty strong, as we mentioned, and most enemies fall over. Now for bosses, you want to stack up as many as you can at once and then just let them all loose. Just keep that in mind for the gameplay. Now for our other aspect, we need to take Banner of War. And we take that because we have that 5% melee energy per ally, including the user, and the aura per pulse. There's a lot of information, but generally you need a sword kill, melee kill, glaive kill, super light attack kill, or finisher to start Banner of War, and then you and your team just need to get kills within the aura to keep progressing it. While in the radius, you will get periodic bursts of healing, and you will get 40% increased melee damage and some increased glaive and sword damage, but we're not really worrying about that. Starting out, the pulses will happen every 2.5 seconds, but at max Banner of War stacks, you will have that happen every 1 second, which is pretty substantial. So it's a really great aspect. It was used constantly when it launched, and it's kind of been overshadowed by Prismatic, but it's still really solid. Now as for our other abilities, we're going to take Blade Fury because it's the only super we have. It's really solid for a roaming super. You'll get it up pretty frequently because of that, but falls off in some boss damage situations. For the grenade, I recommend Grapple Grenade. It is the lowest cooldown grenade you have access to and counts as a melee to start that Banner of War loop, and it has an 87.5% flat gain factor. Your melee is Frenzied Blade. It has a 70% flat gain factor, 3 charges, but that's your only option, but very solid melee. It also severs if you just use it normally, so keep that in mind if you need to debuff an enemy quickly. Your barricade's flexible. I like Towering Barricade just to get some cover. Keep in mind barricades grab aggro, so if you need a few seconds to heal with your Banner of War, put that up, take some cover, and then just get back to slaying out. Moving on to our fragments, it's pretty standard setup. We're going to take Thread of Generation to get more grenade energy. It's just really good. Thread of Continuity will make your strand debuffs last longer. That includes your Unravel and your Sever. Thread of Warding is just our only way to get good damage resistance on the class, and that is 45% damage reduction. And then lastly, we're going to take Thread of Isolation because that gives us an easy way to sever enemies at range just by scoring precision hits. Some other fragments you might consider: Thread of Fury will give you melee energy when you deal damage with tangles. We'll make a lot of tangles here, but they're not always the most consistent for dealing damage. So Thread of Evolution will boost the damage of Threadlings. We make some Threadlings with Horde Shuttle here. This might be worth trying out, but it's kind of niche and will only last for this episode. Over on our mods and armor stats, as always, build for as many sources of orbs as you can. We are going to take a Arc Siphon mod because we're planning to use an arc weapon a lot here, and then we're going to take Heavy Handed. That will work with both our melee attack and it will work with our grapple melee, because it counts as a melee as well. We're going to take a hands-on mod on the helmet to make more super energy, and then we're going to take Reaper on the class side and just get 1 more source of orbs. As for the rest of it, we want to just generally support that arc weapon, so I'm using an arc loader here. Beyond that, we just want to kind of restore some extra ability energy. So on the legs, we're taking Absolution and Invigoration to get some melee energy. Then we take Recuperation for a little bit more healing just to help round us out and get a little boost when we pick up orbs. And then on the class item, we take Outreach just to make a little bit more melee energy because this is a very melee focused build. On our stats, we're going to max out Resilience, max out Strength because this is a melee based build, and just get as much Discipline as you can, as much Recovery as you can, and then just Intellect to 30. Over in artifact mods, we're generally just going to want to take all the Strand and all the Arc artifact perks. Comm 2, there's Unraveling orbs. You really don't need this. We're going to unravel plenty on our own, but I still figured it's worth mentioning. And Comm 3, we have Dielectric, which will give you Bolt Charge when you kill an arc debuffed enemy. Also in column 3, we have Disruptor Spike, which will make Sever even stronger. Normally, Sever is 40% decreased damage output from an enemy, but this takes it up to 52% decreased damage, which is huge. Provides a lot of survivability in boss fights, so that Thread of Isolation is invaluable. In column 4, we have Horde Shuttle, so when you deal weapon damage to unraveled enemies, it will spawn Threadlings periodically, and that's very good. You'll note a boost here that Threadlings inflict Sever. This is not active yet, it should be coming later this episode, but that will be extremely good too. Also in column 4, we have Flashover, which will give you Amplified when you get a full Bolt Charge stack. Amplified's very good now and gives you 15% damage resistance. And on top of that, your Bolt Charges will deal 150% increased damage, which is fantastic. Lastly, in column 5, we have Defibrillating Blast, and this just lets those Bolt Charges jolt and also give you healing whenever they activate, which is just some extra sources of healing to keep you up as you're destroying enemies. I don't show it here, but there's another artifact perk in column 5 that will give you melee regen when you use a machine gun, so consider that too. That can help round this out even more. Over on weapons, this is a pretty straightforward weapon setup. Monte Carlo is the obvious best choice for the Kinetic Darkness slot. It gives you melee energy on hit, It's the best way to get melee energy back quickly. On top of that, we're going to use a Psychopomp in the energy slot. This is a arc air denial grenade launcher from this episode, and the ideal role for this is Pugilist and Rolling Storm to get even more melee energy. Every bolt charge gives you 2.5% melee energy per stack, which totals out to 25% melee energy when you get the full set. So that's really good. And then Pugilist will give you 10% on every kill before flat gain factors. We pair that with Rolling Storm to get more bolt charges from weapon kills. When you become amplified, such as from the artifact, you will get 2 bolt charges instead of 1. One other thing to note is once you have 1 bolt charge stack, weapon hits will progress bolt charge as well. And air denial GLs do this very quickly, every 3 to 4 hits, which can happen very quickly with a crowd of enemies. So you'll be just racking up bolt charge left and right. And then all those unraveling bits can proc bolt charge. So it's never really wasted. In your heavy slot, I generally like machine guns for this, usually arc or strand, but it's pretty flexible. If you're looking for a good strand machine gun, Per Memoria from Paleheart is really good. And then from this episode, we have an arc machine gun, Watchful Eye, which can also roll with Rolling Storm, which is really solid. Now just for a longer gameplay loop. So this is a section of Contest of Elders, just playing this solo, and it's kind of a hectic encounter surrounded by enemies. This is about on power. I think I might be just a few power level under, but this is the most annoying version of this, which is taking enemies with dread. So you get to see me fight a lot of bats, but if I can beat a lot of bats with a build like this, then it's doing pretty good. Grapple melee is good for attacking enemies and also getting around. I hate the bat's tinnitus attack because it's just very annoying. Generally, you just want to put that Psychopomp air denial blast out as much as possible. Make sure you're careful with cover. You have a lot of resilience in this build, but you still need to be pretty careful, because you don't want enemy damage to outpace your healing. See here, we're pretty consistently getting amplified, which is really good. Amplified got such a great buff this episode, and it's really solid. We have got our super in just under a minute, so that's really great too. Don't need to break it out too much, but it is a really good fallback if you're taking too much damage or you just need to clear some enemies. Or maybe if you just hate bats like me. So, lasts a good while, you can shred through a lot of enemies, you can suspend more problematic enemies, and that's just real good. I really wish Flechette Storm worked while you're in your super, because that would be so much fun to do. Anytime you see a cluster of enemies, just shoot the air denial at them. You can shoot it before or after the Unraveling Storm. Both ways work. You just want to get the damage going on them and then unravel them so that you can get that going. Tinnitus is super a pain to use this Unraveling Blast. The boss enemy for this area is out now, so we're going to have to be careful of him. Generally, we want to unravel him and then just put the air denial damage on him to build up full charge stacks. See all the buffs on the side. We've got Woven Mail up right now, but falls off periodically. Finish off this model prisoner. The Banner of War melee damage boost is really great because it applies to our grapple melee, so we can deal some extra damage there. In encounters with a lot of adds, these Unraveling Blasts are so invaluable because they just work down every enemy at once. Flying enemies are a little bit more challenging, but having a ranged melee is really helpful. Titans don't have a whole lot of those, so that's kind of a fun, unique build while still being a little bit melee focused. The Unraveling Blasts also have great tracking. You can see there, your auto rifle is pretty solid for severing. It takes about 7 consecutive crits to sever them. They don't actually have to be consecutive, they just have to be close to each other. Still just working down these enemies here, making sure the adds are down before we focus on the boss. Got our super back again pretty easily, so that's nice. Now it's just boss left. So Tangles also unravel, which is good to know. Can throw that air denial on the boss, rattle him some more, and then we're just going to focus on him with our super. Super is really good. You can sever bosses really easily with it with the heavy attack, and then you just wail on them until they're done. And that's it. Just going over that gameplay loop, you want to unravel enemies with your Flechette Storm, shoot Psychopomp and unraveled enemies to generate Bolt Charge, melee energy, and threadlings. Then use your grapple melee and throw tangles for more unravel. And then as needed, shoot Monte Carlo for melee energy. For larger targets, shoot their crit spot to sever them, and then just use your super as needed. It's really straightforward, but really active. It's a lot of fun, and in all this gameplay, I've been solo, but in a team, it's going to shine even better. So keep that in mind. And that's pretty much it for the build. Just going back to the build overview while we wrap up. I hope you've enjoyed the build. I had a lot of fun with this. I've been wanting to do a build like this for a while, but in the final shape launch, it just didn't really make sense. There wasn't a lot of Strand support, and Prismatic was brand new. I'm glad there's some Strand support here. I expect to see Strand surges for things like Nightfall, so something like this will be pretty strong and allow you to do a lot of damage and kind of work through those while also supporting your team. I think that's a pretty fun, solid build. In general, really appreciate all the support on the channel and all the growth. Don't forget to like and subscribe because it lets my videos see more users and get to more people. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you want to talk about builds, feel free to join my Discord. I'm always talking about builds. We should be getting Act 2 of Heresy soon, and hopefully that has some cool stuff. And I will, as always, be making more builds. If there's anything you want to see, let me know in the comments or on the Discord. I'm always looking for new ideas for videos. And with that, I'll let you go. Thanks. Have a good one.